Okay, back with you 40 kilometers and field in sight off my nose. I'm just reviewing the landing procedure and keyboard commands. So P for the drag chute, and last mission, yeah, it definitely does work. So it's P. I never did figure out how to jettison it. I think it is just hit P again. I know that it did jettison. It might just be automatically jettisoned at a specific airspeed, or it might have been something that I did, but at least I know now that it works, and it actually worked very, very well the last couple of missions. Okay, so let me ditch the knee aboard, and of course I got my fuel warning light. I think that must come on once I get below, what, 550, 570, wherever that little red line, whatchamacallit is, red line is on the fuel gauge. So, yeah, cut it close, but yeah, still, yeah, not that close. Okay, so let's see here. Thinking about recovery, I'm going to, since I have the terrain, I would normally recover in the same direction as I took off, but since I have the terrain out here, it's best on this airfield, I think, at least, to come in from over the ocean, even though we're over the Black Sea, even though you are probably, well, there's a little bit of crosswind, I think. Yeah, there's going to be crosswind from my direction across the runway any way that I do this. So yeah, recovering from the Black Sea side is the way to go here. Okay, so let's see. Is everything safed up? Yeah, I'm back into nav mode. Everything's fine. So let's just go ahead and fly the approach. And yeah, poor 2. I worry about 2 because it's so easy to lose your wingman in these, and well, it happens. Okay, this bridge is interesting. This is one of those places where every time I fly over this bridge, I mean to go back afterwards and look at it in Google Maps and just see exactly how it looks. It's an impressive bridge, to say the least. And okay, let's see. And yeah, just got to remember I was parked right here, so I'll land and get off at the, I can just get off at the first taxiway and then take it right back to the parking location. Yeah, I had the, yeah, there's the Aleutian 76, there's the Antonov 26. I got something else that might just be a truck or something right there, but okay, that'll work. That'll work. Okay, fuel's still fine, 500 liters. Oil platforms out there to the right. Just pull the throttle in, see if I can get this on the first try this time. I am bad in every aircraft about coming in too steep, so I'm going to fly it out enough so that I can lose enough altitude this time and come in on a reasonable glide path. Okay, there's the sun. And just for the heck of it, I will call ATC. So ATC, Sochi inbound.
33, возврат. 3-3, Сочи. Следуйте курсом 193. Удаление 1-5. Давление 757,38. Посадочный 0-6. Занимайте высоту круга.
Okay, gotcha. I've got my speed brakes out to cut into some speed, coming down through 450, 425 kilometers per hour. And there's a little graphics glitch right there, but it serves me right for installing mods. I usually don't anymore. I don't install any mods at all if I can at all help it. I think that's really what burnt me out on strike fighters way back when. It made me just kind of give up flight sims altogether for about 4 or 5 years because I was just too invested in mods, so that every time that I got up in an aircraft, instead of thinking about flying the aircraft, I was just thinking about mods and, you know, the nuts and bolts of how what was going on in the mission was happening. It's something I'm getting perilously close to in this, especially when it gets into the way the mission editor works and the way that some of these little graphic mods work. But I think if I can just keep from thinking about it and focusing on it as I fly it, it's not going to just turn me off and burn me out. And I think just being one of the modders and being part of the Well, it's a terrible way to put it, but part of the problem was what burnt me out on strike fighters and flight sims there for a while. Okay, so gear down, coming down through 300, let me go flaps down. If I can remember my HOTAS command, okay, it's just the regular flaps lever on mine. And I want to hold it about 310 on the approach. Let's go ahead and kill the nose up pitch, or pitch nose up with a little bit of trim. And we'll just hold it here at about 310. I'll be looking for about 270 over the threshold, and I am coming in steep again, aren't I? I'll just pull the throttle in, I'll just let it keep coming down, and then turn slightly left to get completely lined up. So 300, coming down to 290. As I bring the nose up, that's going to continue to come down. As it comes down, I just correct with a little bit of throttle and keep the nose coming. Okay, so I'm slightly cross, or actually I am. That crosswind is not as much across the runway as, well, pretty much crossing and downwind right now, which is fine, so I just need to... Okay, gotcha. Okay, gear down, 3 green, flaps down. So I just need to keep the nose slightly offset to the left, and I need to get it back up to 270 or so. Okay, now that's coming in there nicely, so pull the throttle back in, 250, still a little slow. Just make sure I don't fly it into the smokestack. I can land a little bit long, that's no big deal, especially with buildings and stuff. Right here. Okay, 260, and I will take it a little bit long. Throttle up just a touch. 250, a little slow, but that's fine. Okay, let's go ahead and pull the throttle in and let her sit on down. Okay, let's go shoot out. We'll just let her track straight on down the runway, correcting for the crosswind a little bit with some left rudder. And let me try this. I'm just going to not hit P again. I'm just going to let it come to a stop and see if it jettisons on its own. Let me go F2. You'll probably see the okay, let me get out of the comms menu, then go to F2. Okay, let me hit P again. And yeah, a second depression of the P jettisons the chute. So I'm going to assume this is a taxiway, not an access road, and just take this on over to the left. This is probably just an access road, actually, but I'll take it anyway. Yeah, Russian aircraft can take a little bit of a taxi over a rough field. Although there is always the load-bearing capability of the concrete or the asphalt that you're dealing with, usually concrete, reinforced concrete. So you have to worry about, you know, for example, where would I park an Illusion 76 that's going to have, you know, a certain amount of pressure that's exerted on the concrete? Where would I park a fighter, which, even though it might actually be lighter, might actually exert more pressure on the concrete just due to the way that the weight is distributed over, you know, like an Illusion 76 has several main wheels to, or, you know, here's a good example, how the Antonov has the, you know, 2 wheels, so it distributes the weight over 6 points, whereas a Su-25 only has 3 wheels and distributes the weight over 3 points. So each aircraft is kind of unique in that it just requires different specifications, different standards for where you park it on airfields. That was, boy, I got a lot of practice doing that. Actually, in some of the airfields, part of my job was to help set up airfields out in the AFCENT AOR. And even though that wasn't specifically what I did, I wasn't like an airfield manager or anything, but I had to know all of the different, you know, ways and different standards for how to park aircraft, taxi lane widths, runway widths for clearance zones, you know, where all the frangible lighting and frangible stuff had to be in relation to a runway. So got a pretty good education in that. Okay, so coming back into the parking spot, this might, I might have actually looked out here, this might be the exact spot that I took off from, but I'll take it all the same now. Okay, let me open up the canopy. So left control C, breathe the fresh air as we have a vehicle going by. Let me go left control, or right control in, get number 2 down, and right alt end. It's going to get number 1 down. It's got to be. I wonder if that's got to be tied into the civilian traffic. It's probably like a road there, or it could have been included in the mission. I don't know. Okay, so let me kill power. Good mission. Good mission. I'll take that. Yeah, I'm just going to go straight to the TACVIEW and see what they did, so I'll see you at the debrief. Okay, and now for the debrief. I just have one thing to go over here because I'm just ready to move on from this mission one way or the other. I mentioned a couple of videos back that I made a huge mistake. I did it actually 3 times in this mission, and that's all I'm going to go over right here. Now, at this point in the TACVIEW, I am approaching steer point 3, which is going to be right here. That's the location that I was given a target in relation to. I was given a target at 038 for 20 kilometers from steer point 3. So if I flew 038 for 20 kilometers, I would have had an artillery battery right up here. That was my intended target. So I also have steer point 4, which would have been right up here. Now let me play this forward real quick, and I'll explain how I ended up taking out these tanks. So that was a mistake that I made. It was fratricide. First time in at least 2 years, as long as I've been recording these things. I mean, even offline, I just never make that mistake. It's not a big deal. I don't take this that seriously, but still, it's something that I rarely do because I do try to be careful on these. Now, as I play forward, okay, I get to steer point 3, and I turn to 038, and I'm flying out there along that heading. I'm looking out in the distance. I am looking in the mission. If you pay attention to where I'm looking immediately after I make the turn towards the target, I'm looking actually at the targets. I think if I had slowed it down and if I had played it at high res, I could have spotted. I know for a fact that I spotted the Roland sight. If I had looked a little bit closer to me, I could have spotted this artillery battery, some M109s out there, standard NATO setup for an artillery battery. But what happened here, and I'm about to sort of blame the aircraft and kind of blame DCS for this, but then again, no, I take full responsibility for anything bad that happens in these, because I know how the systems work and I know what the pitfalls are. Now, as I got overhead steer point 3 and I made the turn, I was only focused on flying 038. I was just flying that off of my HSI. So I was flying exactly, I was actually offset, I think it was about 040, so that I could look a little bit off of my nose to the left and start looking out there. So I was focused on the heading. I wasn't really paying attention to the distance. Now, what happened is the point at which I started worrying about the distance was right here where I started to circle, because when I looked down, the distance reading was already at 15 kilometers. So what I didn't realize is that it had stepped to the next steer point. It had automatically stepped to steer point number 4 in this case, and it kind of brings into play 2 of my biggest pet peeves with DCS. Number 1, automatically stepping steer points. That's just not the way that I navigate, and when I can turn that off, like in the A10, you can turn it off using the CDU. I always do. However, in this simulation, it didn't occur to me that it would step to steer point 4, and what happened was that I ended up hitting the target, which was exactly 20 kilometers away, except it was 20 kilometers away from steer point 4 and not from steer point 3. So that's how I ended up on the wrong target. And it also brings into play that second pet peeve, and that's the discrepancy between the numbering of the waypoints, because in actuality, on my system, if you had paid attention to the panel, which I kind of sort of did, although I completely botched it, this was steer point 2, even though it is actually steer point 3. This was steer point 3 on the panel, even though it's actually briefed in the mission as steer point 4. So the target was 038 for 20 from steer point 3. I ended up about 038. I was in the right area. It was just all down to the distance. It automatically stepped to steer point 4, and I was just at the wrong distance, and that sucked me back over my own lines. I thought that was a lot too easy, and I remember being conscious and being kind of surprised that I had flown that far. But then again, I actually wrote that off to, at the time, I don't think I mentioned this, but I thought what had happened, I thought the reason that I was so far away from the steer point so quickly, I thought that I had done something more like that, and that I had not overflown it, and that Therefore, my starting point where I started the turn was a little bit further away and that I had just undershot it a little bit. That's how I kind of justified that part of it in my mind, and that's why I didn't really go back and double check. So, automatic stepping of steer points and discrepancies between steer point numbers in the briefing and the aircraft systems aside, yeah, totally my fault though. I should have, once I made the turn and it just kind of gave me a little momentary pause that I immediately just dismissed. At that point, I should have come back around and just reset up on the steer point and tried it again, because if something just doesn't feel right, especially if you've got targets in close proximity to each other, you just don't want to push it. Now, positives I can take out of this. Well, I know next time that in cases like this, I just need to pay more attention to the systems, think about what's going on a little bit, and just slow down, stop, think, and make sure that I understand exactly what's going on and that I'm not just relying on one source of information when it comes to picking out a target. And in this case, in addition to trusting the navigation system and just going off of that distance and bearing, I could have also just held right there at the steer point, pulled up the map, and done some measurements, and just have been able to verify that the terrain features on the ground match what I would expect for that bearing and distance from a steer point. That would have been very easy to do. It would have taken about 2 minutes. And that's, you know, that's really one of many things that sets what we do as flight simmers apart from what actual people who do this as a profession do. Someone who did this as a profession would have taken all the time that they needed to get multiple sources of information, multiple confirmations that they were on the right target, and to pause for a couple of minutes or even 10, 15 minutes or half an hour, if that's what it takes to verify a target like that. That's what would happen. And I don't think anybody's ever accused me of rushing into anything or not being thorough and taking my time. But, I mean, what I do here and what anybody I've ever seen or talked to or been around that does flight sims like this, I mean, what we do just really is no more than an approximation of real aerial combat. And I make this point only because I did what is undoubtedly the worst thing that you could do as somebody whose profession is the profession of arms. And yet I'm not worried about it because it's doing things like this. This is what flight simming or wargaming or anything that you do on a computer is all about. It gives you perspective on how difficult this stuff really is and just how much time, effort, thought, planning, preparation goes into executing a mission in the real world in a way that prevents big, glaring, obvious mistakes like this and all the little mistakes that, you know, as flight simmers we make in missions, whether we realize it or not. And by making things like this happen in a flight sim, or I guess you as watching somebody make stuff like this happen in a flight sim, we can be more informed observers and have a more informed dialogue about fratricide cases like this, or aircraft systems, aircraft acquisitions, and just the application of air power and all its implications in general. It would be foolish, I think, to say that a person can become an absolute expert on these subjects doing this sort of thing. I mean, after all, this is entertainment, but cases like this and the perspective that it provides me, that's why I do this. That's why I do flight sims, that's why I do wargaming, and that's why I'm just going to move straight on into the next mission and see what challenges and new experiences that one has to offer. So, I'll see you then. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.